What's going on, guys? Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione. We got Jeremy Hartman on the line today. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Excited to be on here with you.
Awesome. So, we don't need to, spend too much background time if you don't like, but just really quick for the people that maybe aren't familiar with you, who you are, a couple of maybe your accolades, and what you got going on right now.
Yeah. So again, Coach Jeremy Hartman out here in Indianapolis, Indiana area. Got into competitive lifting from the strength training that I had done early on with my wrestling training. Had a coach that got me started very early on with middle school with strength training. Carried that all the way through high school. It affected my sports, my athletics, my personal, just confidence and everything as a young kid going up. And then I just knew I just fell in love with the training part, so I kept on going with the strength training. Had some scholarship offers with wrestling, but just fell in love with the process of strength and conditioning, and didn't know it was a profession or anything. But got into competitive powerlifting right after I decided I was going to take any scholarships for wrestling, and then went full fledged in that. Met some really good competitive powerlifters. Fast forward through that stuff, I was a six-time national champion for USA powerlifting. I was teen, college, open, and then got to travel to three different countries. So I got to go Poland, Canada, and also Taiwan. And then there was one World Championships that were in the U.S. So I got to compete around the world and actually experience lifters, programs, nations, how they train, get with different coaches from Russia, Ukraine. The coach from Norway, actually, Detmar Wolf, who's actually the head coach of Germany right now. He was actually a person who really helped me out early on with my competitive lifting because they were very well organized in Norway and Germany. So he gave me a lot of their Norwegian programs, work with me before really we were online training. I was getting Excel spreadsheets that were in Norwegian language. I had to download her and work from
Mhm.
there. But took that and I was working with athletes. I wanted to go into strength conditioning. So I went through the high school route, volunteered at a couple colleges, volunteered in the NFL for a little bit with the Cleveland Browns. And, fast forward to where we are today, full-time strength coach, work with a little bit with the high school kids in general, but have my own private stuff. So we specialize in competitive powerlifters, athletes, you name it, sports, volleyball, wrestling, track and field, you name it. They come in and train from there. And then we have a whole online training system as well now too.
Awesome, man. So yeah, I want to kind of maybe dive in a little bit just to maybe hear a little bit more too, like what it doesn't need to be like a hard percentage or anything, but what would you say as far as like the percentage of your business or like the portion of your business that's maybe catering more towards lifters, and then what percentage is like athletes, and then maybe like how much I guess in-person work you're doing versus like online, like what's kind of the spread like look like for that?
Yeah, I bet you it's probably about 50-50 with competitive lifters and athletes, just because we have, with the online and in person with everything. So in person, we've probably got anywhere from, I'd say 40 to 50 athletes in here training. That includes, we have some general fitness and some adults and stuff sprinkled in there too. From there, and then the same thing, we've got around 30 to 40 of our online athletes. Those are mostly competitive lifters, but I do have some athletes that I had a Greco-Roman guy that we went to Olympic trials together this past year. I got a professional pickleball player. He's making his living off playing pickleball right now.
Yeah,
We've been able to keep him injury free and everything. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting mix between athletes and competitive lifters online too.
cool. And then I guess what is, I guess obviously off season, in season, all those sorts of things like play a role. Um, when you're kind of working with, I guess, like the non barbell athlete, what are like I guess maybe some of the key differences in terms of like potentially like how you're kind of coaching them up is also like versus like how many times a week they're in the gym. So like obviously if someone's just 100% into powerlifting, they could dedicate more like time, energy, and resources into like training. So I guess obviously like in season's a different animal, but let's say you have a stretch of time where you do have some time to get them stronger. Like what is like a typical, I guess, week look like for, whether it be a wrestler or, a field athlete, for how you guys do your coaching program?
Yeah, so we'll talk about off season. We'll talk about our sports and athletics. If they have a little bit more time to come in, it's their off season. I stick to a lot of the barbell lifts for a lot of them because if over time I've simplified my programming so much, I've gotten away from some of the fancy stuff. We've simplified everything to honestly, they're all doing some type of squat, some type of bench, some type of deadlift. Olympic lifts, if they're heavily involved with that at their high school or something, like I will keep those in because I want them, if that's what they're involved with, and if they're in a lifting class or that's what their sport coach wants them to do. We'll put those in with their program with everything. But I like lots of sets and reps. I mean, these younger kids, they need high volume training. They need a lot of practice with sets and reps. They need coach on all their stuff. And it's amazing the results you get. I focus more, there's so much technical side versus more of tracking volume and velocity based training, all this other stuff. I've simplified all that down. Like if you coach kids on sets and reps and get their form and technique right, their list will just automatically start climbing up. So we honestly follow the simplest form, which is linear periodization, depending on where they're at and what they're doing in their off season. But I really follow that so the kids can see progress every week. They know what they need to work on from week to week. We're very good at taking notes. I'm like, hey, in your book, I want you to write this down. Make sure you put a note for this next week. We need to focus on this part. So we're always taking detailed stuff about that. If they, start missing lifts in their off season, or I just don't see where they're at, then we sit down and we talk. Like, hey, what was your nutrition like the last couple of days? What was it like the last week? We were supposed to improve on there. What did you miss? Well, I had this, or I was playing X amount of games or whatever, happened on this part, or, whatever's kind of going on with their life. And I simplified them. Like, these are the things you need to do to get back on track. This is what we need to do here. In season, my good friend Zach Evanesh and I, we strongly get these guys in there. My best wrestlers, and you and I were talking about this because you've trained some really good athletes on your end, which I enjoyed seeing from your part. My wrestlers, no matter what's going on, we keep their training up. If they have a couple tournaments and stuff later on in the week, we try to get as much early on because I know they're going to start cutting weight. I know that they're going to get ready for, later on in the week. So we really hit the barbell lifts hard. We'll still squat heavy at the beginning of the week, bench heavy, deadlift heavy if we can, hit some single leg work, lunges, Bulgarian split squats, dumbbell work, whether we're doing dumbbell military press, some incline press. Love dips and pull ups. Those are staples in our wrestling program throughout the time. But I keep those up. And I think the big thing with in season, it really goes back to the simplest form, which means you just got to show up. No matter how hard wrestling practice was, no matter what's going on, my wrestlers will come in, they'll have a snack. They know even if they're cutting weight, they still have to get ready for my workout. So these guys will come in showered right after practice, come in. My best athletes in season are the ones that still work around. And I have my couple really good Division 1 volleyball players that I've had out here. And they're like, hey, coach, I've got games this day and this day. This will probably be the best one for me to work out on this. Hey, I don't have anything for the next couple days. I'll come in this day. So we'll look at, okay, we'll kind of simplify it, do like, a little bit of lower body on this day because you have to play the next day, maybe a lot more upper body here. Hey, we got a break for 2 or 3 days. Now we're going to hammer your lower body hard on that part. So I think the big thing for them is just picking the lifts, what's going to be going with their schedules, talking with them. If they're real young, talking with the parents about what's going to fit best for, hey, this tournament, or hey, they have this coming up. Here's when I need your kids to come in. That just goes with communication. And I really think the most important thing is the consistency. My best athletes, the ones that are most resilient at the end of the season, the ones that are, they don't have all these little nagging injuries, they're not spending time in the trainer's room getting iced down and getting taped up and everything, are the most consistent ones. No matter what, they get 1 to 2 workouts in minimum a week. When they have Christmas break or they have spring break or whatever's going on during their season, now they're in here 3 or 4 times a week during that time. If they have, hey, we have this week off, they have no games, and they're in there 3 or 4 times. We make up for stuff like that, and they see the results in the end.
I'm nodding my head and smiling because that was when I was primarily working with wrestling and football. And for those that
Yeah.
have listened to me for a while, that was kind of my introduction to strength and conditioning and our business and everything. And I don't know, it's just I kind of like miss it a little bit more. Kind of, we still have a couple of kids. I have one kid that's going to be going to Maryland's doing really well. Rest. So I have a handful of athletes to still work with, but again, primarily barbell in sports, powerlifting, strict curl, those sorts of things. But yeah, we would always say like Christmas time, say, all right, this is the time we're going to pass people. People are going to be,
Yes.
and it's just like some of it is like kind of, maybe you're kind of trying to get them fired up. Some of it's mental, but as like especially in a combat sport, man, like a lot of it, if you can kind of get them to believe, that's giving them that little edge. So when they're like come back, after New Year's or whatever, and then they start to have their qualifiers and stuff, and it's just I don't know, man, it's just different too. It's not even just like the physical part. If they're kind of knowing that even if it's not true or whatever, but if they believe, man, this is like the secret training and this is going to give me that edge, and if they believe it and they kind of buy into it, that's huge. And I think one of the things that's always been tough, and one of the reasons why I kind of started to kind of focus more on kind of powerlifting and stuff over time. I don't know if you had this issue or not, but we've had so in Long Island, we've had so many wrestling clubs pop up, and sometimes it's really kind of tough to like pull the kids away. They just want to, and there's something to be said about the skill work, but as far as what I guess if you're when you're talking to parents or educating people, like as far as like I guess what percentage of their time like working towards skill, working towards strength, or like I guess what kind of conversations if or maybe if you're talking to a parent or if maybe there's like I don't have too many people, but if there are some parents listening, how do you kind of balance how much skill work they need versus what level of strength? And then do you have like any, is there like such thing as like strong enough or like would you have standards for your athletes? Just kind of curious. I know there's like a lot there, but when you're
Yeah.
when you're talking to a parent that maybe doesn't know a lot about strength and conditioning, what are some like key points that you kind of tell them in terms of like what the time commitment should look like and those sorts of things? So I agree with you. The consistency, even if it's once a week
Yep.
better than what I hate to see is you have kids that train all summer and then like kind of Thanksgiving rolls around and then you don't see them and then those are the kids that kind of like you said that don't always make the best results. So
No.
outside kind of looking towards having past results is always helpful, but is there any other things that you kind of I guess tell parents maybe to kind of educate them on I guess balancing like I guess balancing their time efficiently so they're getting like the best bang for their buck as far as the time that the kids are putting into their training.
Yeah, I want to go back to your first statement that you made about that confidence part with the kids as far as getting them to a high level. My kids, like right before the state tournament, they were all setting some type of PR in the gym. And this was like, after a grueling wrestling season, you're going to get banged up a little bit, but it was like, it was a 1 rep here. It was 5 pounds here. It was a couple extra reps on a pull up here. It was a down set on something. What you said about that confidence, that is huge going into a big tournament, a big meet, volleyball, it doesn't matter. Track and field, my athletes, if they can set little PRs, I'm like, hey, you're a stronger athlete. Hey, it's the end of the season. These other kids, their coaches like, hey, go lighter, do this. Like, we're still, I'm like, I'm training you for state. Like, we're peaking out for state. We're not peaking out for sectionals. But what you said there is if I can give them a little bit of confidence, like, hey, or even if they don't set a PR, but hey, how much better was this bench versus last week's bench press? How much better was this exercise versus last week? When you get the kids' head to shake and they see the results, like, yeah, I actually am stronger. Hey, like, man, this is crazy. Like, I feel pretty good. Or, yeah, I didn't know I was going to hit that and I hit that. So I pick out little things that they're going to set little records on or do a little bit better. And that is huge with the confidence going in about what you just talked about leading into a major tournament, a major meet, end of the season for football, end of the season for volleyball. Like, hey, you are a better athlete. You are a better person going into this. You are stronger. You are a little faster. You're a little more conditioned. You're not getting taped up or having to ice down like all the other girls. Like you are ready to go. So that is huge for the confidence. I'm glad you brought that up because that's huge that people don't understand about sets and reps and everything. What you just said is really how you get the athletes ready.
And I just want to one other thing too, and and then I want to we can kind of talk about more of some specifics, X's, O's, and stuff. I think the other thing too, you were talking about keeping the training more simple, keeping barbell lifts in, because I know like now it's like in, I still kind of follow fitness, strength and conditioning. I try to kind of be in tune with what's going on, and like again, depending on like who's in your algorithm and stuff can change, of course, but
Yeah.
there is like a camp of people where it's like the barbell's like gonna make you blow your back out, all the stuff. And I don't know if how familiar you are. It's really kind of interesting, but not to again throw shade to anyone, but Kyle Dake's someone that kind of gets thrown around a lot, which is really kind of interesting because he's kind of gone like one route in terms of maybe doing more kind of quote unquote functional stuff. But what's really interesting about someone like a Kyle Dake is that like I kind of knew his. I don't know if you know the name Dickie White. Uh,
Hmm.
but he was a guy out of Binghamton, and I know for like Kyle Dake had a ton of his foundation was like doing powerlifting,
Yep.
or like
Yep.
so he didn't just like lose that like base of strength when he decided to maybe focus more on injury. And again, when you're at an Olympic level, part of it is like, yeah, you got to be healthy and you got to, it's just you're more kind of surviving. And I'm sure you could talk about when you're at the professional level, it's not always necessarily about like getting, more performance at that point. It's like, can you display the performance that you have? Can you display the attribute, what I mean, that you've built over? So like sometimes like younger kids will kind of lose the plot and it's like, hey, like if you can't like deadlift twice your body weight, if you can't do 10 or 20 pull-ups, maybe we need to like kind of take a step back before we start to do all this like kind of cute stuff. But so when parents are kind of coming to you as far as maybe oh, I want my kid to be like faster, or I want my kid, that's always I want them to be like be agile, or like
Yeah.
that's always like a big one, right? Like what do you
Yeah.
how do you I guess communicate like the importance of like strength training and like what kind of the because sometimes they might be on like another site or whatever, be like, oh, I heard that deadlifting with a barbell is not good for my son, or so do you ever have those conversations still, and like how do you kind of I guess educate people on the importance of strength and, I guess how you go about your training system.
Yeah, let's back up for your listeners that don't know. Kyle Dake, multiple-time world champion, two-time Olympic bronze medalist, four-time NCAA champion, amazing wrestler from Cornell, wrestles for Penn State, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. If you look at, like you said, if you look at Kyle Dake's foundation, it was all very heavy training that he did. And sometimes once wrestlers get to an elite level, um, they I don't want to say they have to do some of the stuff they haven't done before, but they can focus on other areas because they've achieved that strength. It's like how much stronger can we get them? But at the same time, if you look who Kyle just lost to, Zahid Valencia, and I was there watching his match in Louisville, Kentucky. Zahid Valencia, I mean, he goes down and trains with David Taylor. David Taylor is the head coach of Oklahoma State, gold medalist, world champion. They train heavy and hard. David Taylor, when he got the job at Oklahoma State, guess what his first fire was? It was the strength coach down there. And he put his own guy in because he knows how important it is. And if you look at Zahid, the only thing Kyle was losing to was Zahid's strength out there. Zahid was just simply overpowering him with his moves, his defense, and everything that goes through. So when I educate parents like that, it's the same thing with baseball. You see these $1 million pitchers, they're doing all this crazy rehab, functional movement. You don't see the stuff that they used to do before that. And
Yeah.
my kids aren't $1 million pitchers yet. My kids, like, they come in middle school, they can't even overhead press the bar. I guess what, an overhead press is not going to hurt your kid. It's going to be okay for a baseball thrower, especially to build a foundation on there. So I think it's that. And I think most important is the results. You look at my kid Silas right now. He third in the state. He was a Fargo Junior National All-American. He went 7-0 on junior duels and everything. Got multiple Division I offers. Took a great ride to Kent State. When you look at him, like our training is so simple. So when you ask about a selling point to parents, they come in, they see Silas training, they see what he's doing. I post stuff up about him. It's nothing fancy on stuff, but he'll hit PRs, and he's the strongest wrestler in the state. And even when he wrestled junior duels, he goes, I was the strongest kid out there. I got two kids at the University of Iowa wrestling right now, both going to be fighting for a starting position this year. And even Tom Brands, Olympic gold medalist, NCAA champion, he's the head coach of Iowa. He was even telling him, I just had this conversation with Kale Voinovich, who's one of my wrestlers out there. Thomas talked about you need to get the most out of what you need. So that means you need more conditioning, if you need more mat time, if you need more lifting. And Kale, being one of my guys, says, you know what? I need to step up my lifting. I'm facing these 24, 25-year-old guys,
Mhm.
and I'm 19 years old. This is where I'm lagging at because I can get in on legs. I can't finish. I can get to a defensive position, but they'll end up finishing on me. So him and I were talking about that. So we increased his workouts to 4 times a week. So we cut back his mat time a little bit, but we increased his workouts on that point. So I guess the biggest thing on selling point is just the wrestlers that I'm dealing with, the results that I'm getting. Them when they're actually seeing the wrestlers out there on the mats, when they're seeing my volleyball players, when they're seeing them not taped up, or hey, your kids are injury free. Do your kids ever really have injuries? Now we get little nicks and stuff, but overall we're staying pretty injury free because we created that suit of armor. And when you have that, those little injuries, they're going to be small. Hey, might be a little bit on this. Yeah, my shoulder kind of bothers me. Not like, hey, I'm out for a week, or hey, I tore this, or hey, my ACL's torn, or something like that part. So I think the big thing around my area directly is the parents see that. They see those high level kids training. They see what we're doing. And then you buy in because their kids are getting stronger. They see it on the mat. Other parents tell the other, like, man, your kid's doing phenomenal, or what the heck. Or the kids come off and they're like, man, that kid was too strong. He goes, oh, he trains with Hartman. So I think that has been the biggest selling point. And you get to a point and parents just have bought in and, hey, whatever you say, coach, we'll make it happen.
Awesome. So I definitely want to I've got a few more questions about the wrestling training. And part of it is this like it's, a lot of this like feelings coming back because I haven't had someone to chat about this in a while, but and then we'll
Yeah.
kind of move into more powerlifting discussion. But so I don't know if
Yep.
you guys like use this phrase or not, or if even if I don't know if something when I was training mostly wrestlers and we had a couple of MMA fighters and stuff, we would talk about and I don't know if you ever thrown this term around, but Iowa style, Iowa style. And basically, when we would say Iowa style, is kind of like not that like form didn't matter, but like the main thing was effort. You're putting in effort,
Yeah.
and just kind of if you ever watch old like Iowa, yeah, Iowa like videos of like some of they're just they're just like moving weight. They don't really care about momentum, but they're putting a lot of effort in and so that's like kind of maybe like one extreme, right? Where you're just kind of worried about like putting the effort in, and that's like a big piece of things, and you can get a lot accomplished there. And then now it's, you have a unique kind of skill set as well. And like kind of so having that powerlifting experience where maybe like some guys can be like overly technical, right? Where there's like a point where it's like try to move your pinky toe a half a centimeter and you got to get all the slack out of the bar and you have to have perfectly neutral, all these things. So like
Yeah.
especially when it comes to like athletes, and we could even say the same for powerlifting too. Like, you know, do you have I guess a certain because obviously, good mechanics, and then there's some people like some physical therapists where it's like your form doesn't matter, you will adapt over time, and that's a school of thought too. So when you're kind of, I guess having like a standardized technique for like an athlete, at what point is it like kind of good enough? And then when someone's kind of pushing their limits a little bit, especially like if they're kind of getting ready to be in season and stuff, at what point do you like say, do you kind of shut it down? Are there any kind of like, I know like one of the things that we will kind of tell our coaches and stuff, if you kind of see a fire, you kind of put it out, but
Yeah.
sometimes good coaching is just like letting the athlete kind of try to organize themselves in a good way and kind of seeing, kind of watching them and maybe not over coaching them, right? Some people are going to look for more feedback. So what's your kind of, I guess, view on, how much is like over, maybe over analyzing, and then so like I guess the balancing, I guess the tech being really efficient with your technique and putting in the effort, and what is your advice for training with athletes in that sense, as far as kind of balancing keeping them safe, but also like getting a training response, and also pushing them to like also push themselves as well.
Yeah, I think my training is known for number one, it's a technical aspect. No matter if you're a sport athlete, a competitive lifter, adult fitness with me, whatever it is, that is the number one thing we get in here. And I think number two is just like you just mentioned, people forget about the culture. People forget about what you just said about the Iowa style. So we train very hard on the assistance work. Like
Right.
if there's a little momentum when you're doing a bicep curl or a tricep rollback, or that we're doing others like a reverse hyper, if there's a little bit on a glute ham raise, you fall into extension, you're not, kind of rounded or tucked down, it falls into lower back a little bit. That's going to be okay. Your kids have got to learn to push through that. And of course, I'm going to coach them up and I'm going to tell them, hey, fix this position, or hey, keep your head and chest up. Hey, on a glute ham raise, I actually want you to round a little bit on this part. Hey, when you're doing your sit ups, keep your abs engaged. But I think it's a mixture of both. I think number one, my athletes don't get injured. We've never had anybody injured on any main lifts in here. So I always coach everything up, and I keep my groups in small groups too. That's why I tell people when they first sign up with me, like, hey, we're only going to have maybe 4 or 5 people so I can actually coach on all that stuff. But like you said, the Iowa style, for your listeners that don't know, I mean, that's just going, just mind numbing. You got to get the work done. So yes, we will push stuff. And I tell you what, I'm a big fan of Olympic weightlifting. That's where a lot of the sports science comes from. If you look at how the Chinese lift, they are the best Olympic weightlifting team around. Those guys, when they're doing their bodybuilding exercise, there's a ton of momentum. Those guys aren't steady and scroll in neutral spine and every. No, they are actually getting after it with their sit-ups, with their leg workouts, with their hip workouts. I mean, geez, oh man, their back rows are sitting there yanking the weight up with everything. So we will push the assistance exercise stuff that doesn't need a lot of coaching, a lot of technique. I mean, I will push those very hard. And what I like to do is like, if my kid make a small technical error, guess what? We're still going to go up the next set. And I'm going to say, I'm putting another 5 on each side. You have to do this and this better. And it makes my athletes focus on that. It's just like you do a powerlifter. If you're going from your first attempt to your second attempt, like, hey, that moved well, you need to come up with your chest a little more from the bottom of the squat better. Or, hey, you need to really row the weight in on your bench press better. I love that, adding just a little bit more weight and say, hey, you better do this better if you're going to get this, or else I'm going to take you back down. So I tell kids that, and they know if they mess up, I'm like, hey, now we got to take some weight off. I need you to fix this. Or, hey, if even my athletes, if we're doing a regular squat and I see their bottom position's way off, when we get done with them, I'm like, hey, you know what? We're going to throw some pause squats in. We just need to work on this position. So I think it's the technical part, the culture part. And then when you can push those exercises like a sled push,
Mm.
a wheelbarrow, I just had my kids doing that. We push the heck out of those. And that's the big difference with getting them out of their comfort zones here.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think also too, especially when you're training with groups and stuff, and I think that was like, we've kind of talked about, I know you have some did some learning under like Louis. I did some learning under Louis Simmons too. And I think
Yep.
part of like, especially with the younger kids, and maybe you could speak to this, is like also just like healthy competition. And if you could foster that in a way where it's still like high effort and like low risk, like you said, like probably pretty low like risk to like really kind of push like a sled, if you're pushing a sled really heavy or something like that, going to be pretty low risk. So is there anything like in terms of the assistance work, or even like, I don't know if games is the right word, but like just any like competitions that you try to do in terms of like with the kids specifically, to kind of more also like work on their mental game a little bit, or just get them more tuned in with just like competing in general?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They never have an easy workout over here unless we're getting directly ready for a competition, or it's the week of. They all talk about that. Like, no matter what, it's going to be a tough thing every single time over here. Yeah. So we do challenges and stuff, especially if I can get a couple athletes that, hey, they're both squatting today, or hey, you guys are both on upper body today, or hey, this is great. You guys both have deadlift today, or whatever we have, or hey, you guys are all three on pull ups today. even though you just finished this exercise, like I'll put them on all that. So they like, man, you got to go. Hey, you're up next. Like it keeps them time. It keeps them moving. It keeps them, like you just said, a challenge on stuff like, hey, so just did this on the sled over here. Hey, you're up next. I want to get this out of you. Hey, they did this distance. You better go 2 more steps further. Hey, why does he always get to go first? I want to go first this time, something like that. So, yeah, we're always challenging each other. We're always building up. And that was something I picked up from Louis Simmons way back in 2001. When I first started going on the West Side, they were always competitive. Hey, I got this with this many reps, or hey, so and so did this in the morning session. These guys are in the night crew. So it was always a competition. I learned that early on. I learned the importance of that. And it's something that I learned to compete with and something that's always good over here because you'll get a kid that, man, they're tired or whatever's going on, then like, hey, you got to step up, or hey, we're doing time speed bench. Hey, you got to go on your set. Hey, get the weights off, get the weights on. You're up on this stuff. So I think going through that is absolutely necessary. You have to have that, like you said, healthy competition at all times. And my kids know it's always going to be a challenge. Like I give an example. Like yesterday, we had a we got a wheelbarrow challenge going on here. Okay, my wrestlers are getting ready to leave, and it was another thing I threw in the last couple weeks for some grip training and for something different. And I'm like, yeah, so and so got this, so you got to get this. He goes, what? And I just show him the video and he goes, all right, let's put the other 45 on. Let's get this done. So you absolutely have to have that for the culture of your training.
Awesome. So I want to kind of shift gears going into like powerlifting, and I know you also have some. I'm trying to figure out like where I want to go. I guess we will kind of. I definitely want to kind of talk about the raw versus equipped a little bit, just more for my own selfish reasons, but also so we'll say we've been talking about training kids. So I know
Yep.
you also have some high level kind of youth lifters as well. Did really, we got to touch base at the youth nationals for USAPL, which was great. We were both very busy, so we didn't have too much downtime. But I'm glad
Yeah.
that's kind of the nature of it. So it's always good to see someone actually kind of coaching in person and handling athletes and game day stuff. That's always the most exciting for me. So one thing that I've kind of found that's I guess maybe I don't know if challenging is the right word, but maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect where powerlifting can be kind of weird as far as when you're communicating or organizing the training because some of like the lifting, some of the lifts like art is like the sport practice. So it's kind of like, differentiating what when are you like working skill, when are you kind of building up and stuff like that. And especially what I've kind of found um, what's been kind of more popular over the, I guess, maybe like the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. In the early 2000s, like you had a lot of more general training. We still did like a lot more kind of bodybuilding work, accessory work, and just exercise variation. And maybe that was, due to West Side Barbell, and that was kind of the information at the time. So that was kind of fairly popular. And now you're kind of seeing a little bit more specific, less variation, higher frequency. So when you have like a someone that's coming to you that's younger for like barbell training, um, what are I guess your kind of general recommendations for getting someone like started, and then for someone like your high level people, I'm just kind of curious like how you're organizing their training for someone as they're kind of climbing their ranks and they're still like relatively young. They might be kind of lifting some impressive weights, but you're also trying to kind of balance, make sure you're kind of starting them off at the right foot for like a longer, healthy career. So I know there's like a lot to that, but as far as when you're getting someone, I guess, started with powerlifting, I guess how do you kind of get them started and how do you kind of shift their program as they're, I guess, getting more competitive, like with their age group?
Yeah. So we'll talk about youth athletes. So we just had Claire Manus. She just moved up from the youth now in the high school. She outscored the men and all the women, like best lifter for both of those the previous year with all her lifting. The way I brought her up is her dad brought her in right away when she was 10 years old. It was kind of during the COVID era, and he goes, "Hey, we're not sitting around." His one daughter wanted to play basketball. She kind of wanted to go down and learn how to lift weights. His rules like you got to do something here, and they're in a small town in Indiana. And then so he goes, man, he goes, she really likes this. So he started looking up stuff and he got recommended, to me over here but a little about around 2 hours or so. But what I brought her in is she got to be around my top female lifters, Shelby Miles, Jenica Baldridge, all multiple time national champions, collegiate national champions, and now open. But we focus on technique first, and I would do about 20, maybe 30 minutes of every single set, every single rep, coaching her on all the little stuff that I needed. If I thought she needed to stop on a box, just learn to sit back into a squat a little bit better, I would do that. I start her with a high bar squat. You don't throw too much at them at once, okay? And I get to the point where you can see as a coach, and you know this, you can see when they're kind of done for the day with that squatting exercise, or hey, we've done enough benching like that. That's it. Let's stop over there. And then I would give them assistance exercise because you have to build up again. We go back to that suit of armor. Ed Cohen and I talk about this a lot, building that assistance exercise up. So I do about 20, 30 minutes of teaching in the main lifts, just starting off life. I love 5 reps. 5 reps, it's not too much conditioning.
Yep.
You really won't start missing reps. It's right in the middle where it's a little bit of conditioning, but you can focus on it. If you give a younger kid 8 to 10 reps on a main lift, they're just going to get to the end and worry about finishing it. With 5 reps to 3 reps, somewhere in there, it's just enough where they can focus on it and get a little rep, get a practice in there, but it's not too much conditioning and it's not too heavy. So I like the 3 to 5 rep range when teaching. And then assistance work, high volume training on there. We were doing dumbbell push-ups with her. She couldn't do pull-ups, so we had to use band assistance on there. I was teaching her glute ham raises on that point. A lot of abdominal work too to help protect because they're going to be sitting back and using a lot of the lower back. Reverse hypers, we started with just body weight, a lot of back extensions, actually teaching her how to squeeze her glutes and hamstrings to actually come up in a proper position on there. A lot of bracing, we were teaching her about that. So I actually would put a belt on for a few sets just to teach her to actually push into the belt so she would learn how to do that for several sets and reps. People are like, oh, you shouldn't train with a belt. No, actually teach your kids, like when you train with a loose or medium type belt, you'll get the feeling of pushing into it, which emphasizes deep diaphragmatic breathing into that part. So every time she'd come over, we'd focus on that, and I would give her dad little stuff like a lot of tempo stuff. I'm real big on that age, slowing the lifts down, 3, 2, 1, even a pause, and then coming up slow, 3, 2, 1 on that part. So I slowed a lot of lifts down, did a lot of assistance work. I did athletic training. We were doing box jumps. I was teaching on that. Tons of sled work, like you just said. There's not much technique to a sled work. You really can't. You don't have to overcoach it. You can make it fun and challenging. I was giving her sled pulls on that part. Um, I gave her a lot of farmer walks too. Again, we challenged like, hey, you did 20 pounds in each hand for this distance last week. Hey, you're here this week. Let's try to do 25 pounds for the same distance, or let's try to do 20s again, but go a little further. So with the young kids, it was like you just talked about with kind of that confidence you want to build in them. Hey, look how much you improved. Hey, look at last week, how much you improved on this part. Hey, look at this, how much you improved. Remember when you were doing this exercise on this? How much better was your 5 reps this week with, that time was like 55 pounds on her bench press. So I slowly brought her along. And then as she got better, we started teaching her once she built up a top shelf. Then I taught her a low bar squat in that position. Once her bench started getting good close grip, I learned to keep the elbows in. Then I started to widen her grip. The poor girl, she's maturing and everything. So we had to switch from, let's see, conventional to sumo, back to conventional. Wasn't feeling very good. And now we're at sumo with everything. Before she was growing and it was just kind of bothering her hips a little bit with our squat stance. So I had to actually bring her stance in. And now we had to widen it out a little bit because she can sit back into it a little bit more. So just recognizing what I saw, what we needed to work on. I want her strong in conventional and sumo. I want her to be able to pull ups. I want her to be able to do, inverted rows, heavy dumbbell benching. I wanted her to have control. And we never really missed a lot of reps. I mean, her dad and I would call stuff out. And when they would come in once a week to train, I would give them certain things that I need her to work on, non-negotiables. And then we could pick out some fun stuff or, a couple things maybe she wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that like exposing kids to like high variety of exercises and you kind of I don't know if you want to nerd out on like some of like the sports science and stuff and just talking with I guess some of the I don't know if this is a Bondarchuk thing or just something that he kind of talked about, but a lot of times I don't know if it was up until like 12 years old or whatever, like what the exact age requirement is, but that's why a lot of people say like, oh, have your kid do gymnastics if they're working on their flexibility and they're tumbling and they kind of retain a lot of those skills like early on, and then supposedly it's helps kind of create that foundation so they just have more potential versus specializing. Because again, what I've kind of seen with powerlifting is that now you're kind of having these kids like choose powerlifting as like their main sport as opposed to like coming in with like a sport background. So I guess one of the challenges that I've seen working with like maybe kind of in the teenage to like junior category, some of them like they don't know how to like work like as a team, like they don't know how to work with people with other people. They don't necessarily maybe they don't take maybe losing too well if they do miss a lift or whatever. They've never like lost before and they don't know how to kind of handle that. So some of the mental strength is not always there. And then yeah, they just maybe haven't been exposed to just like general training. Like I'm sure like myself and we didn't talk too much about your background, but I was a wrestler and played football growing up. I'm sure you did like some just general like training. Like we did trap bar deadlifts and touch and go bench and box squats and we just kind of did like and then just kind of more bodybuilding assistance exercises. Now what I've kind of seeing is that you have kids um just doing like low bar squat right away, sumo deadlift right away. Again, not to like make this, a negative talk, but sometimes you see kids like they're snapping their forearms and stuff like that. They're not like they're kind of going to the extreme like mechanical advantage techniques like too soon. So I like that you kind of said like starting off with a more like modest technique and then we can kind of, specialize over time. Um, so in terms of, I guess like, I guess the mental side of things, if someone doesn't have any like athletic experience, like when you're getting them ready for like their first competition, how do you kind of like approach, going from, okay, now they're technically competent with everything, but now they have to have like the pressure of standing in front of judges, in front of a crowd. Is there anything that you do to help kind of mentally prepare them? Do you try to keep the pressure kind of low? Do you try to keep the pressure a little higher in training so they can kind of simulate that? Any, thoughts on like as far as getting them from a training, I guess a training environment to now like they're doing their first meet and actually, competing. And like I said, some of the girls, they're doing this at a high level at a national meet. So when the pressure starts to get higher, I guess, what are you kind of doing to, I guess, prepare them for more the mental challenges of, competing on a platform?
Yeah, just to back it up a little bit, 100% agree with you. Like I have even all my powerlifters in high school level, like I have them all, and I keep encouraging them, even Claire and everything, the youth lifter, like multiple sports. She wanted to do track, she wanted to do tennis, she was doing basketball for a while, so I absolutely push on that stuff. The
Yeah,
only time I'll give and take on that for a competitive lifter, if it's their last junior or senior year,
sure.
I even want them to finish up. I said, hey, you've been playing football for how long? You've been with this sport coach, like he's counting on you, the man's giving you a lot. Kids don't realize that. So I said, hey, you need to finish what you started, and then we'll go full blown after this. But that's the only time I would have serious talks. So other than that, I want them to stay in multiple sports if they can all the way through. But just no excuses. Still got to get your training in with everything. That's why I brought some of my other lifters up through. The only time, like I said, the last couple of years, like if they really wanted to go into it, but they still had to have that athletic base. And if you look, one thing you even pointed out, the power lifters that have that athletic base, they tend to have a longevity in this sport.
Yeah.
And Dave Tate and I had this talk last year. I was helping Dave Tate with his train your ass off seminar, and we were talking that a lifter always has to keep. And he loved a lot of my lifters because they were always in shape, they never lost flexibility, and they were always like some type of athletic training going on at all times. And Dave's like, he goes, I think that's why your athletes are really good. He goes, because they seem to have a base at all times. And he
Mm.
goes, I think a lot of lifters, when they lose a base of conditioning, all of a sudden they can't even get through 9 lifts at a meet. They're rounding their back on the last set of deadlifts because they're not in shape enough. If they lose that athletic base, that's when little injuries start happening. All my lifters do single leg work, lunges, split squats. Um, we even do obviously single leg curls, stuff like that. But Jared Martin, my 1,000 pound squatter, I even have him doing box jumps and stuff. Okay. I have him doing a lot of single leg in the off season. I have him doing a lot of dumbbell work. I always keep that athletic base where he's a pretty good strength athlete, I guess would be the correct term, all year round. I keep his conditioning up. There's certain times where I'll drop it off a little bit, but there's certain times where I increase his flexibility training too because he's a bigger guy. And that has been one thing that's helped him out and helped a lot of my lifters for 10 plus years now competing at such a high level where, like you just said, all of a sudden these kids come in and they're hitting low bar squats and they're doing a sumo deadlift and their back isn't even strong enough to do a conventional, but yet they're going to this over here. And guess what? They have a short career, they have injuries, or see all the above. They have short careers and injuries, and then, like you just said, you lost confidence. They're not getting ready for it. To answer the second part of your question, getting people ready for meets, especially if they haven't done it before, I think it's a great thing in my gym. We go back to the culture and stuff. I'll have, hey Shelby, go talk to so and so, or hey, one of my lifters, go talk to remember your first meet, or hey, they're getting ready to do nationals for the first time. They've done a couple local meets and a state meet. Now they're getting ready to step on the big stage. So I have a lot of my lifters, especially females, talk to each other about that. Some of my guy lifters talk to each other. And Jared Martin, Jared was getting ready. He's leaving. He's actually in China right now, competing for the World Games. He was talking with Mary Lappin. Mary Lappin was fifth at the Olympics for Olympic weightlifting. She's our current U.S. American record holder, current national champ. Both of them were just talking about international travel. They were talking about some of the stuff that she did, getting ready for it over here. Some of the stuff that Jared needs to do. So I think it's not only just me talking, but it's having my athletes kind of talk to some of those lifters. Hey, don't this what's going to happen here? Hey, get ready for this here. Hey, you got to prepare. You got to hold your start command even longer. You don't know which judge you're going to get. And you saw that at nationals. Hey, you don't know if they're going to make you pause, or hey, you tend to sink in a little bit, so you're not going to get a press command real fast. Like you can't freak out. You got to be ready for these little things. And so I guess we just practice those over and over again.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's good that like I think it's good to have and that's part of like I think when you're like actually in an environment where you're fostering communication between the athletes, they're actually talking to each other. Because one of the things that's always been another thing that's kind of a thing that's frustrating, or with the lack of I guess powerlifting crews, I guess, because I think there are like, there's so many like places where you could train, you have the equipment, but not everyone. A lot of times people are either keeping to themselves. This is kind of what I see, like at least on the East Coast and stuff. I mean, things can be different in other kind of regions, but a lot of times if I'm kind of traveling, or if I'm kind of, training at XYZ gym, there's a lot of these gyms are outfitted the 24 hours. They're ultra convenient. And sometimes this is something that Zach says all the time, is that you could choose convenience or excellence. And sometimes when things are too convenient and you're not kind of forced to, you maybe travel a little. I know you kind of mentioned, I'm sure you have people that travel from all over to kind of seek out your coaching. I know I've had
Yep.
that with myself. And sometimes when things are too convenient, you kind of get a little complacent, and then you're not kind of around people that are kind of really elevates you. So I think it's good to like kind of talk with people that have kind of been there and done that. It's one of the reasons why I still try to, compete myself. I've been doing more strict curl training as of late. Taking a little bit of like a break from like, doing full powerlifting meets, but I still squat, bench, and deadlift is part of my general strength training. I'm sure it'll always be kind of
Yep.
in the background. And don't tell my wife, but I probably have some, goals when I'm, masters as far as coming back, and it's kind of, but that's to be TBD on that. Uh,
Yeah.
but anyways, yeah, I think that like, talking with others who've kind of have the experience, I think that kind of lowers the stress a little bit, because there is like a lot of unknowns, especially when you're traveling and stuff. And that was one of the reasons too for myself. I've competed from 198 to super heavyweight, so just having the experience of being fat, being lighter, being lean, going equipped, going raw. I think the more you can kind of like put yourself, and again, you have the experience of yourself. So I think that's great. So that's kind of like the next kind of thing I wanted to kind of touch on. Just I know you have like a single ply background. You got some very accomplished equipped lifters. You kind of mentioned Jared. Again, not many people know what it's like to have 1,000 pounds in your back. I've had it a few times, and certainly I've never walked it out. I multiply for me in the monolift and training, but I could tell you from experience that it's heavy and it's bone crushing. And um, so I think that like there's definitely like a level of a different like level of care and attention to detail when it comes to equipped lifting. But maybe before we kind of get into maybe differences in like coaching techniques and programming, if if someone is like looking to get into single ply lifting or equipped lifting, like how do you kind of explain like what it is and maybe like why you even want to do it? Because one of the things that again I still kind of get now is like, oh, the bencher does all the work, or you hear all these different things, or like, oh, that's cheating. Or so how do you kind of would explain equipped lifting to like the lay person that maybe doesn't really understand the differences, or like why you might even want to consider it, as an option for anyone that's listening?
Yeah. So number one, before you even get into equipped lifting, John, you know that you got to have a base level strength. I see too many of these younger kids that get thrown into equipped lifting and stuff, and they have no base level strength, have no business, putting those weights up, especially with the F8 shirts and all that stuff that's out there now. So
Yeah.
I explained to them you need a base level strength before you can do this. Like I'll pick out some numbers, some baselines that they need to maybe hit before they get into it. And once they kind of hit those, if that's something they want to get into, it's not as easy like as putting on a shirt. Or I'm like, you're actually going to squat less in the suit the first time. You're actually going to bench press less, and you're going to deadlift less. And it's going to take a while for me to do that. And I slowly bring them into it. I guess the way I explain it to them is like competitive or supportive gear has always been a part of powerlifting. We've always had knee wraps on. I mean, it's part of a little bit of for Olympic weightlifting too, but it's always been around in some form from the early on with the marathon suits and the Red Devil knee wraps and the Ace Bandage knee wraps that we always had. We were always looking for that. If you look at Ted City, one of the first guys to bench press over 700 pounds, he had a special shirt made because he had a shoulder problem. That's where the bench shirt they say originated from. And Ted had benched over 700 at the Hawaii World Record Breakers, which was a very famous powerlifting meet back in the day. If you looked at it, you're like, hey, what's his secret? And he had a shirt, that was sewn up, specifically around his shoulder and was a little bit tighter than a normal one with everything. And that's where they say that had happened. But I think it's just always been around. It's another form of it. Just like I said, there's baseball, there's softball, there's freestyle, from a wrestling background, there's Greco, there's folk style, and there's freestyle. It all is going to help you. And believe it or not, if you look at my competitive lifters, once their equipped lifting goes up, because you're handling over 100 pounds, 200 pounds plus.
Yeah.
So you're already shaking your head because you already know where I'm going with this. Your raw lifts, and like you just said about having more weight on your back, having more weight in your hands, being able to handle that over and over and over again. A lot of my equip lifters, their raw lifts go up. Braden Gulch came to me. Braden just won USAPL Nationals, best lifter all around. Um, Braden, even like his raw lifts where he goes, "Hey, these are still going up without." He goes, "What the heck?" I'm like, "Well, dude, you're handling over 600 plus pounds in your bench press shirt." And he goes, "Yeah, I know, but I'm handling over 500 pounds raw now." He goes, "This is great." I'm like, "That is true tricep training." People, when they think of triceps, they go, "Oh, tricep push downs or rollbacks or extensions or something." True tricep training is very heavy close grip bench training or very heavy overload training. The other stuff is like lights on a Christmas tree. It looks pretty, it helps out a little bit, but that's not really the base of everything. So when you're handling board presses in a shirt with, 100 pounds over your max, 150 pounds over your max, 200 pounds plus over your max, that is what's going to get you truly stronger. That's what's going to teach you a proper setup. Try setting up on a bench or a squat, with another 100 plus pounds on your back or 200 plus pounds. Like you're going to learn to set up even better. You're going to learn to take a weight out even better. You're going to learn to handle it even better. And that's why a lot of that stuff goes up. So I'm a big, even for my raw lifters, John, we overload stuff all the time. I even put knee wraps on my raw lifters. We always have like, some type of slingshot or bench daddy on or something that we're doing on that part. I've even, when they get a little bit beat up in the off season, get them a loose pair of briefs, to help out with the bottom position on there. They're like, hey, we're handling 35, 50 pounds over our max. Like they start getting confidence. And you, as well as I know, the body starts adapting. You start getting a little bit thicker in those areas. You start developing a little more muscle mass because you are training that nervous system. It has to change. Like, whoa, like he's putting more on us. We need to tighten up over here. We need to add some thickness over here on this part. Hey, our forearm training, best forearm training, overload bench training. Okay. You can do all this goofy stuff you want. Best forearm training, overload that, overload your deadlifts and stuff, heavy holds. I think that's a big part. So I just tell them it's all around lifts. You're going to handle more weight. It's a new challenge and everything. And even some of them that, if their hips are bothering them a little bit, or that you can see they almost need a little bit of break from raw lifting, it gives them a new challenge with this overload stuff, that we can work on with a bench daddy, we can work on with a slingshot, that we can work on with knee wraps. Hey, now like a knee wrap's going to pull you forward. Now you're actually going to have to learn how to sit back and come up out of the bottom. Hey, I'm giving your hips a little break. Oh, coach, my hips feel great. These loose suit bottoms are like amazing. Why don't we, do this earlier? Hey, I'm hitting some heavier weights, or hey, that actually felt good on my back this week.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to comment on, and I think we were talking a little bit before the recording about Blaine Sumner is a good example where he was kind of
Yep.
dabbling a little bit in both. And unfortunately, unfortunately, Blaine's had a lot of injuries over the years, and I think one of his first major ones, I believe, was like hip slash like low back injury. He was like I think maybe squatting maybe in the high eights, low nines at the time, and eventually that's when he started to kind of make the pivot towards just kind of really focusing on still like one of the
Yep.
biggest single ply performances of all time. I got to see some of that in person. I think it was at the Arnold. I forget which year it was. Maybe you remember, but when he did
Yeah, is that the Arnold? Yep.
at the Arnold, that was like I still like don't know. I mean, at that 1,100 pound squat, I felt like he like almost lost it like several times, like on the way
Yeah.
down. But just really incredible stuff. But anyways, one of the things I think that I wish more people, one of the things that I'm trying to do with myself in terms of for the powerlifting community and education is just for people to be more open minded about equivalent things. So Blaine's a good example. If that category didn't exist, he probably would have been done several years earlier, and then we wouldn't have seen like such an epic performance like that. Just that little single, not the little, maybe little is not the right word, but that single ply suit, just giving him a little bit more compression for his hip. The knee wraps allowing him a little bit more, spring out of the bottom. And again, if anyone wants to try to like pick up 1,000 or 1,100 pounds and you could put whatever you want on, it's still a tall order just to kind of unrack that and then to be able to kind of stand up and brace with it. So yeah, I think whether it's bench only, like I said, I've been kind of dabbling in strict curl. I think just being open minded to other, like you said, other kind of disciplines in when it comes to barbell sports, and
Hmm.
lifting can be a really viable like option like as you get older. You see like a lot of the guys, and again, there's a healthy way and there's a better way to do it. Like I said, I think that you kind of mentioned about just staying in shape. So I think I know like for myself, like I'm looking to kind of drop some more body weight and so I think as long as your general health and conditioning is in check, I think something like an
Yeah.
equipped lifting can be a great option for if there's people that are listening that are maybe older, maybe they have kind of a bum shoulder, maybe they have a bad hip. Getting a loose pair of briefs or like a loose single ply suit or like a loose bench shirt, could extend your career. So it's just something to consider. and just to kind of be open-minded to it. Like I said, when in the early 2000s, that's kind of I think all that's kind of like what powerlifting was.
Yeah, that's all we had. That's all I had. Yeah.
Raw wasn't really like a thing, so
No,
um,
you'd make fun of somebody if they showed up
um,
like, "Where's your suit at, man? Where's your bench shirt? You all right?"
every-
Oh yeah,
everything was like kind of in reverse, which is kind of
it
funny.
was. Yeah,
So yeah, so I don't
totally.
know, if you have, I know we kind of been talking a lot about youth lifters, but I just wanted to kind of like comment because I think sometimes people, and then kind of people are like, oh, I'm done and that's it. And if this is something you really love and you want to continue doing it, I think it's just good to be like kind of open-minded to those things. And I know,
Yeah.
before we, just before I forget, we kind of talked about, if there's anything else that you want to maybe talk about in terms of like the programming, you kind of talked about potentially kind of, not outsourcing, but consulting with other people. You kind of talk for Jeremy and stuff. So just want to maybe kind of just have one. And then if you have a hard out at any time, just tell me because I could probably talk to you for hours.
No,
And
we can keep going, man, all day.
so in terms of like kind of programming, consulting with people. So like with equipped lifting, especially like if you're a little bit heavy that day, if your nervous system is quite not like recovered, your muscles might be recovered, but maybe neurologically your spine's like not ready yet. What
Yep.
are some of the biggest things that you've had to kind of, I guess, adapt to when it comes to like programming for an equipped lifter? Some changes that you've had to make, and if there's any specific examples, I know you kind of talked about, some of your lifters, like I said, going to the World Games. And for those that aren't familiar with World Games, essentially, it's like, you know, essentially like in line with the Olympics. Like I said, they're trying. So a lot of those sports are kind of like in line to be considered for the Olympics. And I believe that even this year, I know we talked, and it's been a single, equipped lifting for. Is this the first World Games that's Raw also? Is that true?
I think is either that's one of the previous one they had
Okay.
the first
So,
Raw with
anyways,
everything,
so
but yeah,
yeah, but I know like because I remember like when Mike Teixeira was doing it and stuff, and some other people, but anyways, in the past, it's always been single ply, and it's been kind of so it's the closest thing. If you like win a world, it may not sound like I know a lot of people like oh like what's better, but if you like win a World Games, that's essentially like the equivalent of essentially being an Olympic champion or as close to it as you can. So it's a big deal to go
yeah.
to World Games. That's what I'm trying to say. So,
Yeah.
so
Just to back up, reiterate what you said. So Jared Martin, 881 raw squat now, 400 kilos. Just walked out, just knee sleeves and a belt. But same thing what you just talked about. He was getting a little bit beat up a couple years ago, and it wasn't anything major, but we could just tell, like you just said, you could see like the squats weren't popping up. He's a little more recovery time now. We have to take in a heavy squat every couple weeks. So this is when I said, hey, it's time to step back on this, and that's when I first introduced him to single ply gear. And plus, I told him, being a drug-free athlete and sing and competing USAPL, I said really to squat over 1,000, like it's not going to happen. Like you'd have to gain a massive amount of body weight. It's just not going to happen. So this is one of your goals, and we need to start working on this. And he even said what you just talked about. It gave his hips a little bit of a break. Not only did it help his raw squat, like it just provided a little bit of support because that gear binds up around the joints and gives them a little bit of a break. It adds that compression there. Nothing bad with his shoulders, but again, his shoulders just getting beat up, drug-free, raw lifter. So giving him the shirt now is actually taking some pressure. You know how it is off the first part there of the lift. The shirt's going to help you from here. Yeah, it'll help you with your lockup, but it's really just that first bubble part that's going to blast it up. So doing that gave him a new challenge, like you said with Blaine Sumner was a great example. It protected his body for a while. Now he can actually go back and forth to raw and equipped, and he's pretty good with it. He goes, man, he goes, having that little, I don't want to say a little bit of a break, but having that compression, having that different challenge, having that support. He even said he's added several years to his lifting career. He goes, honestly, he goes, I think I might have been done by now like, he goes, I'm pretty sure I would have been done. He goes, but going through this equip lifting and the raw lifting, he goes, it's been a career extending part on there. So I liked how you touched base on that. And like you said with Blaine, he had some, hip issues and some labrum issues going on. It provided him there, and he did some amazing stuff raw, like you said, over 900-pound squat, but over 1,100 pound in gear on that little whippy bar, that we had out there for him. But yeah, as far as like with the training stuff, let's talk about that now. With my heavyweights, this is what we're doing with them. My bigger guys, usually about 2.5 weeks to 2 weeks out, that is when they would take their heaviest squats with equip lifting. Raw lifting, you can pretty much train all the way up through. And I even had some of my equip lifters, Braden Gulch, my 900-pound squatter in single ply gear. We even kind of go 2.5 to 3 weeks up when he hits his heaviest single, just because, like you said, the nervous system has got to adapt. He needs a little bit of a break. So I take his usually about 3 weeks out to him, 2.5 to 3 weeks out for him is when he hits his heaviest squat. We did a little over 900 in training. And I slowly bring him down to the low 800 or upper 800s, and then I bring him down to the low 800s, and then it's just like a 400 or 500 pound raw squat, and we go to a meet. Jared likes to have a little bit more weight on his back, so I'll keep him about 2.5 weeks out. I really won't put anything past that earlier than 2 weeks, like it's just bad. But we hit 1,014 in training. That was an all-time PR in single ply, walked out and everything. I hit that about a little over 2.5 weeks out, and then I slowly brought him down to like kind of like an opener between opener and first and second attempt, so upper 900s where I wanted him at. And then I just brought him down to kind of like his last warm up, like an 881 raw squat, 860 squat. And then he's got a whole week, not off, but a whole week before he competes. And that's been the big thing. Now, my lighter weight lifters, what I can do with them is I can train them pretty heavy 2 weeks out and maybe a week and a half out. The bench press, you can always train pretty heavy. Jared, we still did, we still hit his opener a week out, a week and a day out from his lift because we're working with Blaine Sumner on Jared's bench. So benching, because it's right by the upper body, it's right by the heart. It's going to recuperate a lot faster. It doesn't The blood flow doesn't have to fight gravity, go all the way down to your feet and come all the way back up. This up here is going to recuperate way faster. So I will keep the benches pretty heavy all the way through. But the squats, yeah, and the deadlifts probably about 2.5, 2 weeks to 3 weeks out, depending on who they are. The lightweight guys that recruit fast or they were recuperate a lot faster. So those I'll keep pushing them out a little more. And I think that's a big difference with my guys. Again, it's like you said, it's getting to know your athlete. It's getting like, hey, their body might be good, but hey, maybe their spine after 900 pounds, 800 pounds, 1,000 pounds maybe isn't ready for that. So that just comes with coaching them every day, whether it's online or in person, and making the best judgment calls.
Yeah, and then with the bench shirt, I think too, like I think you can make an argument. Everyone's a little bit different, but I think that in terms of equip lifting, that can be like the most technical. So potentially waiting a little bit longer, besides the recovery time, just like making sure that you're sharp, you're getting the groove down, and you know, like, do you know like what you could actually touch? Like, there's so many kind of factors. I know, like there was, I mean, I don't know if you kind of had this, but like there was some lifters like, oh, don't touch until the meet or say, like I mean, we there was like all sorts of different advice as far as, and then it's like, well, how do you know like what you should open with if you've never if you've never
Yeah.
like, had a touch in training and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think that in terms of like the recovery time, I know you said it's going to be very individual for people, but as far as like that week like leading into the meet, is there any like other things that you guys do like in terms of like active recovery if they're not like barbell training, or any days like of complete rest? So just kind of, because I know like sometimes like it could be very variable. I know like for me, like I've always started to like really kind of cut things. I don't do a lot personally. When I'm doing equipped meet, I don't do much of anything with a barbell.
Mhm.
If I'm like less than a week out, I might, like I said, do some. Sometimes I'll even like, instead of like, I'll do like a heavy belt squat, or I'll do like maybe I'll do some. Sometimes I'll do like a bamboo bar bench just to kind of work on my bench stability a little bit and just kind of keep that. Anything in particular that your guys like to do, like a few days out from competition, just to kind of like just make sure they're feeling good, or they're primed for the meet?
Yeah, so about a little over a week out is the only time we hit the last heavy equip bench. So I like a week and a day or a week and 2 days, somewhere around there. It depends on the athlete, but I do like to still hit our opener. I still like to touch it, and it really helps their confidence. Now, again, like we talked about very early on about getting your athlete's confidence up. So sometimes I might go just a hair heavier. Sometimes I go a little bit lower because I want their confidence up all the way through. But I do like them so they can touch something. And then really the week of, yeah, it's pretty much all raw lifting. Sometimes I'll have a very loose suit I'll put on my athletes, but I do like to keep their bar on the back. And I learned that from the Europeans back in 2005. I saw my competitors who, for a guy from Ukraine, he had won my weight class that year, Sergey Pevnev. And Sergey was over an 800-pound squatter at 220. And we were chatting afterwards. I saw him and the Russian lifters, like we were competing in the afternoon, and those guys were up in the morning training. And they just kept talking about losing muscle flexibility, losing the lifts over and over again. And again, coming from an Olympic background, you see a lot of Olympic weightlifters do that. If they're competing in the afternoon, those guys are used to training,
Right.
the Bulgarian system 2 to 5 times a day. But so I will keep the barbell lifts in there a little bit, but yeah, I'll just moderate them. If I had to give you like a scale on stuff, they're handling, if they're raw benching, over 500 pounds and quit benching over 600, the week of the meet, man, we're getting in maybe in the low 300s. Just I like to get a few, and I like to keep some sets and reps in there. So we'll do like triples to 5 reps. I like to keep some reps in there for the guys. It keeps them flexible, keeps them moving. I think as far as recovery, we have some pretty good chiropractors in the area that we use. Definitely massages are a huge thing, especially for my big guys as they get going, because little things pop up, little, not so much tweaks, but just, hey, this is really tight. Or like you said about your spine and spinal care with everything. We do a lot of Dick Hartzell band work as well, decompression work. So it's just what my athletes need. That's what I'm there for, whatever they need on that part. But I think I keep the barbell in their hands a little bit more, barbell on their back, and even on their deadlift. So we'll squat, bench, and deadlift maybe twice that week. And I'll still keep a little bit of assistance exercise because one thing I've noticed is they'll lose a little bit of muscle mass. So John, as I'm taking my lifters like the last couple weeks, even though I'm reducing their main lifts because we've kind of hit our peak over here at week 3, especially or week 2 to 3 on squat and deadlift, I will keep their assistance work up because you'll start losing muscle mass. If all of a sudden you're handling 1,000 plus pounds, now you're only handling 800, your CNS will adapt and be like, oh, we don't need to keep this muscle mass on. We don't need to keep as much. So I will push up the assistance work during that time. So nothing crazy where they're getting out of position or going to hurt themselves. But I'm like, okay, we're going less here. So we're going to push this a little bit more, add a few more sets, keep a little more volume this to help keep that muscle mass on. So you're still stimulating the body so it knows you have to keep this suit of armor on you at all times. So I think the week of the meet, we'll just do the main lifts. I'll throw a few assistants, something simple that they're not going to put anything on, even leg curls. That's when we'll do heavy tricep push downs or just little things that's going to keep the mass on and still going to keep the body moving on that part for them.
And I think something that's often not talked about too. I know, like, I think it might have been. I don't know if you did any like cross Eric Cressy or whatever, but one of the things because I know he used to. A lot of people don't know he used to compete in powerlifting for a bit too. And one of the things it's like, oh, I just bench 400 pounds in a shirt. It's like, why am I doing 200 band press downs? It's like, well, you're getting blood in the elbow. You kind of so like there's a lot of
Yep.
benefits sometimes for just like that. Some of that like kind of the high rep kind of it's like, oh, like why am I just this is like a bodybuilding thing. I'm just getting a pump, but it's like, well, there could be some restorative benefits to just like kind of getting blood like around your elbows and stuff. And if you're doing like I said leg curls, like can I get some kind of blood in the back of my legs and stuff? Can I make sure those tissues are pliable? So I think there's a lot
Yes.
to be said there, but I think the main thing is like also just, don't overdo it, but do what you need to do. Kind of going into me because sometimes if you are, if you're taking like I don't know over 90% the week of the meet, especially if you're really strong, it's like you're probably not going to like have your best performance. But doing something
Correct.
to stay active, and like I said, especially for big guys that maybe have trouble like getting the bar right on their back and stuff, that could be like something. Those lighter sets of squats could be enough just to kind of maintain a little bit of mobility and make sure that you're not too stiff. When it comes to game day, so I think that's some really good advice there. So I
Same
definitely
thing like you said, just something simple like a reverse hyper, like that's going to put a pump in your lower back, but it's not going to cause like you're not going to be sore from it. It's going to help get it's going to pump that sacrum sac over and over again. It's going to release that pressure back there. So just little things like that where I will keep a pump in there. And like you said, it's going to keep you healthy and keep that decompression down and something that keeps the mass on a little bit.
awesome. So I definitely want to be mindful of your time and make sure we don't, go too much over. But I definitely want to get some advice. There's some things I like to close up before we kind of get into like the last couple of sections. I know one of the things I know you want to talk about. You had some recent experience kind of working with more throwers. And so if there's anything that you want to kind of comment on in terms of things maybe that you've learned, some observations, I think that probably more than any other athlete, I think those are the strength that those athletes can exhibit in like a short period of time is pretty incredible. But what's been your experience like kind of working with some of these high level throwers and any kind of observations or kind of takeaways from your time with that so far?
Yeah, we've always been, I've always been blessed to have some really good jumpers here. We had the collegiate NAI national champion, the triple jump here, a couple All-American collegiate athletes in the high jump, one in the long jump. And now I've always had throwers here and there, but this past year, Megan Tomei, who's the best Big Ten coach for throwing in the entire nation. Megan's been one of my athletes, competitive lifter, competitive strongman athlete. Um, she's been bringing a lot of her throwers down, all the people from Indiana University, guys and girls with everything. So they are just phenomenal athletes. When you're talking about Division I thrower, they are strong, they are powerful. And most important thing, John, like we talked about, they're used to being criticized. Like you mentioned earlier on about playing sports and learning how to lose, learning how to win, learning how to come back, learning how to train harder. These guys are used to being corrected every single throw. The coaches, Megan's got her camera out there, been a couple of her practices. She's filming them. They're going through every little thing. They're used to that. So when she brings them in the weight room, they want to be coached. They want to know every little thing. It's funny. You work with elite level athlete. Usually I'm down showing my younger kids or, all right, this is how you sit on this. Those I can almost tell a little bit like, hey, do this better. And they can like apply it right away. And they are so phenomenal, so explosive. Because what's a thrower do? You go outside and you throw for about an hour and a half. Then you come in lift for about an hour and a half, and that's pretty much your life. Yes, again, you have to have a conditioning level, athletic level, everything that goes along with that too. But at the same time, like I mean, those guys are pretty much doing. You mentioned Bondarchuk earlier, like he has specific standards for each one of his hammer throwers, each one of his lifters. And Megan was under one of the greatest hammer throwers of all time. Her coach Judd Logan, four-time Olympian. And Megan herself was third in the nation and stuff too, and built her resume up. But having these people come in, and we have Chloe Lindman, who was Big Ten champion in the weight throw, NCAA All American in the hammer throw. She's been coming in as well. It's just they are so fast, so explosive. But most importantly, to all your viewers out there, is they are coachable. They want to be coached. They want to be told what to do. There's no criticism. There's like, yeah, keep telling me what to do. Like, okay, now we're gonna move on to this, and I tell them why, and it's like we're moving on to this next part. So those, I mean, if you look at our Olympic weightlifters, a lot of them have a good throw, especially our females. A lot of them have a good throwing background and stuff too. Obviously, Olympic lifts are held, with throwing and everything that goes along with it. But they make some really good athletes, and I'm excited to keep working with the IU throws team and Megan because they are not only just for powerlifting. Obviously, I want to recruit them when they get done with collegiate. I told them that already, but it's just real fun to see them do it, and they love competing. They love being in the gym with my competitive lifters because they're pointing out stuff on their lifts because they're very fast, very explosive. So it's been neat working with them and being around that other group to train some of these high level elite people because they're doing phenomenal stuff. And it's just it's easy to coach them with. They all want to get better, and they know the stronger they get, a lot of times you're going to throw farther, especially shot put when it comes to that. And there's certain things obviously I don't do with hammer and with javelin and stuff that I do with my shot put throwers, but they're getting some amazing results and it's showing up on the track and field, which is great.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that like especially for if someone's coming into powerlifting and you hire, a powerlifting coach, I think it's important like, how to learn how to receive feedback and kind of just understand that like sometimes people just because you did something kind of wrong, whatever, doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It's not like an attack on you. It's important that you're able to kind of take that criticisms. On the flip side of the coin, I do think that there are sometimes, and I'm sure you've kind of, you know, gone through many iterations in your own coaching career. There's also times where you can kind of be over coaching somebody too, like we kind of talked about, where it's like you're kind of paralysis by analysis, and if you always keep switching things, it's kind of hard to. So knowing like what the athlete needs, one of the things that not exactly in the same vein as kind of accepting feedback, but one of the things my old wrestling coach was telling me when I was kind of learning under him, just kind of mentoring and stuff. And he was a little bit more of like a hard ass for sure. But he said that some athletes are going to need more of a kick in the ass. Some athletes are going to need a pat in the fanny, and basically just kind of understanding like who you're communicating with.
Yep.
Just like so understanding how the athlete is going to receive feedback. And when it comes to coaching and just coaching cues in general, like when somebody's like this is like a bad cue, whatever. If you're getting a good response from that athlete, then like just kind of take note of that, and like and if there was like kind of maybe like a poor performance after you kind of gave some feedback or whatever, okay, like kind of evaluate, was it like my delivery or was it like the feedback itself? Do I need to kind of change? Does this person need a different tone? Does this person need a different, more of a like kind of a tactile thing or more of a visual thing? Do I need to kind of adjust? Kind of, am I kind of, am I standing over the athlete? Am I kind of getting down at their level? There's so many like little things just with your delivery. And again, if you
Hmm.
actually coach people like in real life, if you're just kind of someone
Yeah.
you wouldn't like know, like, what I mean? So I don't know if we didn't, I know, so like my background too, like I started out volunteering at my kid wrestling program. So like, coaching like, youth wrestling kid. And then I became like the head middle school wrestling coach. And then I did strength and conditioning. And then, so how I'm going to coach like a seventh grader is going to be different than how I coach someone that's, like I coach some people like some of our wrestlers like went to like some Ivy League schools and stuff. So there's going to be a different rapport there. And then like, someone who's going for like an all-time record, powerlifting total is going to be, it's all going to be different circumstances. Sometimes you have to kind of wear many hats and sometimes you got to be a little bit of a, I think some people say like a chameleon in terms of, changing, adapting to your environment and what the athlete's going to kind of respond best to. It was kind of interesting just to kind of bring things full circle at youth nationals. The way that I'm kind of coaching like our daughter is going to be like a lot different than like me, coaching like a super heavyweight, guy who's, what I mean? Just, and it was kind of interesting to kind of see like a lot of the people in the back, most people were like parents. And like I said, and then some of them knew me, some of them didn't, whatever. But it's like, it's just very interesting for me to kind of see the dynamic of, some people were kind of like hard on their kids. Some people were, a little bit more having fun and stuff. And just like kind of like the difference in, uh, what, and I don't know if maybe some of the parents weren't even aware of what they were doing or not. But like I said, for me, like my goal, for our daughter was just to kind of have a good experience. She hit PRs and everything, but it wasn't like we didn't take it like too serious. But until like it was time for her to go, and then she kind of game face on. But we just tried to have fun because ultimately, like you said, if to be the best athlete you can be, like you need to be doing this for a long time. And if you don't have a good experience early on, if you don't have a good relationship with coach, if you don't have a good relationship with the sport, like you're not going to kind of stick with it. So,
Yeah,
and
and what you just said, what you just said about there with everything too, that was the same thing. Like I was coaching, back there, we had a couple of youth athletes, and one kid Enzo, set American bench record, but his dad just wanted to kind of be back there, kind of be like the fly on the wall or help out a little bit. And it was funny because like the way I was handling some certain things and numbers I was calling, because at the youth level we can pick out 0.5 kilos, we can choose any number we want, which
yes,
is
yeah,
pretty awesome for those
yeah, I
kids.
love it.
But again, I set him up. He had his first 9 for 9 day. And this is
Awesome.
the first time like I've gotten to coach him directly. We just started this past year with everything. And I've known his dad for a while. He knew Claire and some of my other lifters, and he goes, "Hey, it's time I step back as coach and kind of be like maybe dad, maybe kind of helper a little bit, kind of assistant." And what you just said is how we kind of handled that. And I picked out certain numbers, and we hit little PRs. And then he got his American bench record. And then we hit a deadlift PR and stuff too. And he goes, "Man, I wouldn't have picked out those numbers." He goes, "Man, we would have had like a 6 for 9 day." And he goes, "The way you handled some certain things on there," he goes, "Man, that was great to see." And he goes, "I kind of stepped back," and he goes, "This was awesome for my kid." And what you just said, now the kid's like, "Hey, his first things, when's our next meet? When can we train for something new?" Had he had a bad day at that level, then like you said, he's gonna, well, I don't know. Sometimes you get the kids, I don't know if I want to do this, or I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll do another one later on. But having that good experience, and one thing you and I talked about, John, before this was like our style of training, because it used to be like kind of West Side barbell conjugate style system in the early 2000s. So what you just said about what my athletes need, because we've had, you and I were discussing this, too many of these kids come in right now, younger lifters, and they're, like you said, squat, bench, and deadlifting several times per week. They're not doing enough assistance exercise. They're not building themselves up. Injuries happen. Progress ceases later on. They get good progress for a while. And then all of a sudden, little things start happening and it takes them back. So when I coach my lifters, like we do a little bit of the conjugate, not so much speed and dynamic, but switching barbells up. Or I'm like, hey, we just talked about pause squats or tempo squats. I will give those a lot in the off season because this is going to help fix this. Or, hey, I can tell you to keep your chest up all you want. Guess what? When you put the safety squat bar on and it throws you down and forward, you're going to learn more than me say anything to keep your chest up. Or if these chains or bands kick in a little bit, like you're going to know more of like what it means to push through a lift as much as I can tell you about everything, more than just saying, hey, go a little faster. Hey, push through it. Well, now I got chains and bands. You're like, whoa, halfway up. What the heck? And you're like, hey, I just missed that rep. I said, you got to push through that. And all of a sudden those lifters can push through that. So I will do a lot of, not a lot, but several variations based on, like you said, weakness analysis. Hey, this is what we need. This exercise is going to, this tool over here is going to help, enhance this or fix this or give you more, like you just talked about, better feedback than what even I can give you because that's what my athlete needs. Then as we get closer to a meet, then I get more, very more specific with some of my more intermediate and kind of advanced lifters.
Yeah, I think with the whole this will probably be a good place to wrap up, and we could always do a part two. I think like with the whole like
Yeah.
high frequency thing, specificity thing, one of the things I've been kind of like pondering on, and I don't know if you've thought about this, because like you're seeing people like I'm having a brain fart here, Jesus Oliveras and stuff.
Yep.
He's kind of like gone backwards a little bit. Now there could be some like reasons for that. He's becoming like an adult, and I think he just had a baby, and so now it's like there's other, there's a lot of other intangibles. I don't know him that personally, but like you're seeing a lot more of these kids that are like you're seeing kids like squat 800 pounds, like that are like teenagers, and you're seeing like, so like a lot of times now part of that is that like these athletes are kind of coming in like earlier, but I
Hmm.
like wonder like, especially with the whole like high frequency thing, someone like an Agata, or these other people that are kind of popularizing some of these routines. I think that like my like kind of best guess or my hunch is that I think that they're just gonna like hit their like career peak just sooner.
Yep.
That's like whereas someone, if you talk to someone like a Jen Thompson, if you talk to someone like Kim Walford, um, that have been doing this for a long time and still like competing at a high level, they're a little bit more like on the lower frequency, like higher intensity
Yes.
side. So I think like I'd rather like personally like, and again, yes, things evolve. Yes, we're getting new information. Yes, like the athletes are getting better, but I think it's good to like also like look at like what are like the 40 plus, 50 plus lifters doing, especially if they're hanging with the open, like, Jen could still hang, with the open girls. There are some,
Yep.
so I think that there is something to be said there. And I still think that she's one of, the most impressive like strength athletes of like this like era. And she's not like benching 5 times a week. You know what I mean? So it's just like, so it's one of those things like, could you do that for a period of time? But if you think that's going to be like your kind of split for like 10 years, I think so. And I think that if you, in terms of business, in terms of training, in terms of anything, if you want to be like the best, if you want to like really maximize, you're probably going to like do this for at least 10 years, I would think. So that's kind of, I know like for me, like I hit my first elite total I think 13 years from competing, which is not very good. But like, a lot of people don't even, so I'm going to be entering my 20th year of like competitions and competing and stuff. So technically, I'm not going to do a powerlifting meet this year. So technically, I'm, we'll see. But anyways, I'm not done. I'm not completely done yet. But I still like, I hit an all-time bench PR like last year and I had some of my best, like dots, Wilks, whatever, formula you want to use. Some of
Yeah.
some of my best performances were like 35 plus after, so, and that's not necessarily because I got stronger, but I just became a better lifter and I became more
Yep.
precise. I was able to express my strength better. My best absolute strength was probably in like my like 26 to 28, but I became like a better lifter. I kind of figured things out. So, and then some of my best results in terms of both absolute poundage and like, by formula, were in like my mid 30s. So, anyway, it's just something I've been like kind of pondering in terms of like, do you want to be a flat? And then it's good. I don't know if you have conversations, but sometimes like I'm working with a 19-year-old kid that just deadlifted 804, and I'm trying to say like, hey, like, let's think about like when you're like, 25. What's going to happen? You know what I mean? Because I think that he can be, a really one of the best all open lifters if he kind of sticks with it and kind of focuses on his health. And I can't even imagine, like, like I said, I've only done like a 700-pound deadlift, and that's been like, I was happy with that. But so anyway, it's just something to consider. Like, I think that there's different like kind of pressures in terms of like some people might just be kind of doing this because they might get clicks or whatever. So I think the more you can kind of dive into like why you want to do this and also for how long you want to do this for, because I do think it's important because at some point you're going to slow down. At some point you still want your body to be healthy. So I don't know if you have any other kind of like takeaways or kind of parting words, just some advice for people starting out. But I just wanted to, because I think we're kind of on the same page with that. It's important to like always have the athlete's health in mind. But if there's
Yeah.
anything else that you want to kind of like just some for the listeners as far as advice for people kind of starting and just kind of, maybe they just want some direction in terms of, starting their powerlifting journey.
Yeah. I think just on my end, Ed Cohn and I just did a seminar last year at Crown Point High School, and I had some really good high school kids. One in particular got some serious scholarship offers for powerlifting, which for listeners that don't know that those are out there. If you're a
Oh,
top level
cool.
lifter, there's
Amazing.
yeah. And just talk with him. He goes, listen, he goes, you just got to get a little more coaching. He goes, and you just need a little more time. He goes, you can't be missing reps, which he wasn't, but he was kind of pushing that limit where, I want to double this. He goes, no, 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 no. I want to see a good set of five over here with this. Really, he goes, you just need more time. And he goes, you just need to be around these guys so they can point out all these little things when you lean forward on your squat a little bit, when you don't pull your shoulders back enough on your deadlift and get in a proper position for start. It affects your lockout. When you're sitting there trying to work your lockout, he goes, no, it's really your starting position. So I really think it's going to take a lot of time. And I think some of my lifters, I'll give you an example. They will get a little frustrated because they'll look at all these lifters hitting these PRs, like you said, and then, like you said, they're hitting 90% a week out, and they go to a meet and they just do terrible. And my lifters, we just bring them along very slowly, and we'll set little PRs along the way to keep that kind of carrot in front. But then at the meet, like you saw, that's when they set all their PRs. That's when a lot of stuff really great happens. So I think just knowing that it's when you're at the meet is when it counts. Like you need little benchmarks along the way, but as long as you're programming out properly, competing properly, like you said, not hitting 90% a week out. Let me see what I can do, or let me see where I'm around. I want to make sure like that you're already chipping in your confidence. If you look at the old school powerlifters, whatever they could triple back in the day, that was their opener. That it was as simple as that. Whatever I can triple, unless I'm cutting weight and everything, that's when I'm gonna open up. So I guess my advice is definitely you got to find a great coach. When I saw you up there and what I've come to know just from you throughout the years, you can tell your lifters are coached, which is why I like talking with you because I can tell that they are properly coached. You can tell, there could be strong kids left and right, but when I've seen your lifters out there and I've seen you like you can tell the technical aspects are right. They're on point with stuff. I saw you coaching and handling them. Like it was just a good situation all around. That's why I was excited to talk with you about training and everything. So you can see a good coach on that part. So I think it's really finding a good coach. It goes back to what you said it's missing. It's finding a good crew. I think I don't realize sometimes when I get people like you said that come in, hey, I want to train with you guys, or hey, I'm in town. I'd love to come work out with your team. They don't realize how focused we are. There's no headphones on, there's no earbuds in. Like my group is all like a West Side Barbell. Like we're all kind of focused on our training, what we're doing. We're supporting each other. Yeah, they might break off into different assistance exercise once they get in with our main lifts, but I think having that culture and that team around is huge. And I think like the last thing is just it's just going to be time on the bar. It's going to be patience with everything. Like you were just giving advice to your kid, like that over 800-pound deadlift. That's freaking phenomenal. But hey, it's going to have to be slow increments, man. We can't say we're going to be an 850 in this year and a 900 in a couple years. Like that's not the way this works. You're going to get injured. You're going to have some setbacks here, but let me bring you along slowly. You might even have to tell your lifter, hey, we're going to step back a little bit because we need to work on these things because I have your best interest later on.
I just gotta like the headphone thing is so funny because like literally like it's like it's to the point where it's almost like not like a full blown fist fight, but I've had to like I've kind of like sometimes I have it's just like you could just tell that people that don't like work out with people or don't like it's like and it's usually and again and I will tell them like and I'll kind of explain to them, but it's like because we're very big on when you're not going, like you're like engaged. Like it's not just like, so like if you're spotting, like you're paying attention. If you are
Yeah.
spotting, like you're actually like what you're not just like kind of, you're not being passive, right? So like if you have your headphones in, like you are there is bandwidth getting taken away. There's your attention is going somewhere else. And I've
Yep.
even gotten to the point for myself because there's all this thing like is Bluetooth good for you? That's a whole other like weird thing. But
Yeah.
I'm actually because I used to like when I do my accessory work, like if I sometimes I'll go to a commercial gym, whatever. But I don't even. I'm just like you know what? I'm just like banning like I'm not even like using headphones anymore, just because it's like
Yeah.
I want to be like more like in tune with what's going on. So whether it's me training by myself and I'm doing like a lat pull down. Anyways, it's just one of those things. It's like you get like people like are glued to their phone. They're glued. They have to be like on a device and it's like, man, it's like actually maybe like talk to your training partner, maybe like give them a cue, maybe like, anyways, just one of those things where, and then like the meme, I always like joke with my wife because you see all these pictures. It's like the coach is like holding the athlete's earbuds and like that's like their main job.
God, no.
Their main job is like not to call their. It's like, oh, just coach, can you like hold my? I just need you there to hold
Yeah.
my ear. Like that's like literally what like power like. So like to me, and again, it's like if that like gets the athlete in the right zone or whatever, but like I don't know. So like one of the things is like the culture has just shifted so far like to like this whole other. So I'm trying to be like more open to like this new age of lifter and kind of understand them a little bit. But there's certain things like that's like the one thing that really drives me like nuts, but more than anything
Yeah.
else, just because like you're just so like. And at some point, yes, maybe you do need to be like a little bit like selfish, confident, whatever. Like I talked with Eddie Hall one time. Is like he talked about like arrogance can be like a good thing in certain situations if that kind of breeds into like a confident lifter and you kind of are so in. But I do think that like for long term, being a little bit more like team oriented, community oriented, and not being so like just anyway. So just like a whole thing, the headphones
Yeah.
thing just drives me crazy. But no, I do appreciate you coming on. I could talk to you all
No.
day. Where can people find you? Where can people find more about like your programs and just kind of follow what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so Jeremy Hartman is located right around Indianapolis, Indiana. Search me online, Hartman Performance Training. That's my business name out here. So hartmanpt1 at gmail.com. Look up Hartman Performance on any social media and just simply reach out. If you got a question, if you have something like that, shoot me a DM, email me on stuff. If you have questions, not even just, I've had people just, hey, can you look at this? Or, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Or, hey, I got a 13, I've had conversations with people like, if it's something small like that, I always answer, for something like that. Like that's just part of the sport, part of what the generation that you and I grew up in with everything, that team orientation, that kind of like that Lou Simmons who would always take my call no matter what. If I came down and trained, like he would help me out. So I think, yeah, just reach out to me on any of those things, and be glad to answer your questions, help you out, put you in the right guidance, help you out with anything. With if you're a young kid asking for, hey, I'm looking to compete in powerlifting in college, how do I do that? Whatever you guys need. An older person, like you said, a master athlete, hey, I'm looking to do my first meet, or hey, I'm looking to do my first nationals. What do I need to know about that? Just message me. I'm more happy to chat with you.
Yeah, and I know you do like a lot of also outside of all that you. I know you're like me, you like probably have something going on every weekend, but I know you do also do a lot of speaking engagements and stuff. So one thing I also want to like highlight too, outside of like the follows, outside of the coaching, because one thing I do like, it's good to see you still speaking and stuff. I just did a speaking engagement. The Air Force, we have a base close to where I live, so they've been like kind of contracting me out for some seminars and stuff. So I've been working with a lot of
Nice.
people on base, and it's just great. It's just like nice because unfortunately another thing that's been like kind of tough to see is like a lot of these like kind of seminars now are more like, especially in the powerlifting world, it's kind of like meet and greet and just kind of like lifting party, take a picture with your favorite influencer. And I do think it's good to like support the educational events because it's really like those in-person seminars, man. And like you said, like going to a gym and like, being a fly on the wall and actually jumping in with the training. Like you learn so much more from like those hands-on experience. You sure you can watch a video, you can listen to this, but so I would definitely recommend. It's something I'd love to see you speak at some point. I know I think so anytime I'm going to try to kind
Yeah.
of learn more and stuff. And like I said, there's been so much of my like education has been from like those in-person events and just visiting gyms and visiting West Side and visiting all the places. So definitely like if you are like have the opportunity, I would also like encourage you guys, especially when Jeremy's clinics or whatever, if you have the opportunity, definitely support those events too. So, but if
What you just said is the best thing. That's what Ed Cohen and I, that's why we love our seminars together because it's hands on. We just did a seminar up here and I brought in like 10 of my lifters. We all walked into the seminar. It was a CrossFit one I got invited to go speak at, and they're like, "What the hell?" Like Jared walks in, I got
great,
Megan walking in, even my little teenage world record holder, she's walking in, and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna talk to you guys for about 20 minutes up here, and the rest is gonna be hands on." And by the time, and we went all the way through lunch, she said, "Hey, I got an hour and a half to speak," and then I said, "We got a whole hour at lunch." So I said, "We're not going anywhere." So my team sat there and we coached the heck out of everybody, and they got the most out of that versus anything else. And I think that's a big thing. Like even at the Swiss Symposium, I'm very fortunate with Ken Kanakin to go speak out there. It was me, Dave Tate, Ed Cohen, Matt Wenning that we got to do the powerlifting part. But again, we had a hands-on stuff, and if you look at all of our best stuff, that's the best where people get the most out of when, like you just said, when you're visiting all your places and doing that stuff. So I really turn my seminars into more of a hands-on, get people up, get them moving, actually coach them. And even coaches that came into my last summer, like, hey, I really don't want to lift, but I'm like, all right, then stick right behind me. I'm going to stop. I stopped the whole presentation a few times. Ed and I watched a couple people lift. I'd give some feedback. Ed would get some feedback. And we talked to our coaches like, hey, you're here to coach, but here's what we're seeing. Here's how you need to fix this. And our people got the most out of that. So I think that's the best benefit of the seminars. I was just at Indiana University giving a seminar too. Same thing. I was speaking to the kids for a little bit, but then it was a hands-on in the weight room. Purdue University head swim coach is a good friend of mine. Went and gave an in-service for their strength staff, but then we worked with the men and women swim and dive teams. Again, guess what? That was all hands-on. Is me teaching a little bit, you going to work, me going around coaching the heck out of you guys with everything. We did a band seminar for flexibility with those kids, but like you said, the more you get hands-on, the more you see it. It's a lost art versus somebody up there speaking. You come to mind, you're going to be doing something. Whether if you still just want to coach, like I'm going to still make you coach. Like, hey, well, come up here. You're going to watch this athlete. I'm going to tell you what I see. What do you see? And I think those are the best seminars you can get involved with.
yeah, and then like to your point too, like if you're looking to like in-person coach, online coach, personal trainer. Yeah, put yourself in those situations where you can kind of you can get feedback and reps.
Yep.
I had a guy. One of the things the Air Force was nice enough to like. We did open it up to some outside people. We didn't have a ton of outside people come, which was fine. But we did have one of the guys was like a local trainer that follows me, and was like, all right, come up. And then I just kind of like, I kind of, I want you to coach this guy. And like, so he got some like, because when are you going to get like a chance to like, get critiqued like that? And so he was really grateful for that. And that was cool. And he's trying to start like a little kind of powerlifting team at his gym.
Nice.
And that's really like how you get like better, you know what I mean? And then
Yep.
and I think that like that's the thing. If you want to be like an online coach, sometimes maybe like you're gonna see a client at a meet here and there, or whatever. But if you're not getting like those in-person reps, like how are you going to be effective on game day? How are you going to be effective with like making the corrections when the pressure's on? When you can't like just do it at the luxury of your computer, and you know what I mean? Like you're on a clock, and so I don't know. It's just one of those things where I think you can kind of tell, like you said, you can kind of tell the people that are actually coaching and the people that are maybe just sending a program behind a computer, which is again there's a need for that too. But I
Yeah,
think
but like you just stayed on that. Like I have my lifters coming every 2 months. Like even my online athletes, like we have our get-togethers here. And like since Jared was actually living with me for the last 3 weeks. We put him through a training camp.
that's
We had
cool.
all these lifters coming in left and right because we're getting ready for Equip Nationals. We had, you had phenomenal. You just had a best lifter. For bench nationals and equipment as well too. Got you train. I mean, he started off as an intern for you, right?
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
he still trains so Benny, and he's got like a good following and good business. So it's
Yep.
kind of so that's like the other thing too. I think where it comes to like, coaches, educators and stuff. We have like, Nick was an intern, and he has his own business now, and he still kind of trains. So like our team is like, prepping him and stuff, and they're handing off, and again, you can't just have any Joe Schmo like hand off a 600-pound bench. So like we have all our crew is like trained to All right, they're comfortable spotting an 800-pound squat. There's, you know what I mean? So like there's like you can't, so I think that's like a really nice reflection where so he's kind of like, has his own kind of programming and stuff dialed in. I happen to kind of be there. I was like, hey, I'll handle you on the day. And
Yeah,
I handled him like like he did an 820 like multiply bench, which is crazy. Still one of the I think I don't know like where it is now, but he was I don't know. It was like very like highly ranked at the time. It's a huge bench. He transitioned to
yeah,
USAPL. He's been doing well, and it was one of those things too, like where if the other I think it was the guy's Lucas Pribble. So if Lucas kind of made his third attempt, Nick would have had to have made his third attempt. So I'm like figuring out the formula, and so that's
you and me back there running around, man.
it's
Yeah, we're trying
it's
to see.
that's
Yeah,
like fun for me where it's like the attempt selection matters, the preparation matters, and even like where it's like one of those things where you could tell like even just like the warm-ups went smooth, the pressure is down, now we're prepared. Now the other guys kind of scramble and now like so that's like kind of cool, and that's like to me like you could again for me like I'm definitely a better coach than I am a programmer. Like my
mhm.
programming is still like elicited some great results, but that's exciting to me. Where like how you warm up the athlete, prepping them, and then just actually like kind of having the best result on game day. Because again, you could have someone who's really super strong in the gym, but do you make the right calls? Are they prepared? Do you have a good like? Are you able to kind of like if the athlete's having like an off day, can you like adapt to the situation? Those sorts of
Yep.
things. Just like little things like that. Like Benny takes a long time to set up. Like how much time is left on the clock? There's so many like little things like that, and something that's such a simple sport. But yeah, no, I could. But yeah, no, it's really cool, and I think that yeah,
Well,
no,
that's why I appreciated watching you and you coach your athletes back there. You could see like everything was on point. I saw just a little bit of time, you and I were running around like you said,
yeah.
back and forth everything. But it's good to see a coach like that, the way you were handling every people. I'm like, man, he's got some good guys. I saw a couple of the cues you were giving, a couple of the fixes back there, and most important, the confidence you were giving your athletes, and that's why you had such a good showing.
Yeah, and I think that the mental side definitely gets like overlooked in terms of like, because you can get like that could really make or break somebody too if they, if something kind of goes wrong or whatever. But yeah, we'll definitely have to do a part two. Definitely, I'm gonna be kind of trying to keep a close eye on your schedule and hopefully we'll like link up again. But definitely give Jeremy a follow. Definitely, share this podcast if it helped you. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong and we'll see you soon.
All right, guys, thanks so much, John. Appreciate it, man.